I think, from my clock at least. All right, is everybody ready to roll? I've got 5 o'clock. I call the meeting to order today, Monday, March 8th, 2021. Roll call is Selectman Howdy Goodwin,
Yeah,
Mike Mansalilli,
Here.
Mackenzie Jewett,
Here.
Kevin Buck,
Here.
myself, Jamie Thurlow, Town Manager Chris Saunders, Deputy Town Manager Jesse Dunbar, newly appointed deputy, and Town Clerk Katie Anderan, and also Town Harbor Master Justin Zeeby. Is there any adoption on the agenda? Anybody would like to change anything? Okay, approval of minutes. We have the minutes from March 1st.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of March 1st, 2021.
second,
Been moved and seconded to approve the minutes from March 1st, 2021. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, Howdy,
yes,
Mike,
Yes.
Mackenzie,
Yes.
Kevin,
Yes.
and myself is yes. All right, next is approval of warrants. If any of you don't have the warrant list, I can hold it up for you if you want to see it. We have warrant 82 for $5,565.90. 83 for $9,023.74, and 84 for $16,883.43.
Make a motion to accept warrants 82 through 84.
second,
It's been moved and seconded to approve warrants 82 through 84. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, Howdy,
yes,
Mike,
Yes.
Mackenzie,
Yes.
Kevin,
Yes.
and myself is yes. All right, we have committee appointments. We have an opening on the rec board, and we have someone who has applied. Lisa Murray has applied, to be on the rec board.
I'll make a motion to appoint Lisa Murray to the seat on the Recreation Board expiring June 30th, 2023.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to appoint Lisa Murray to a seat on the Recreation Board expiring June 30th, 2023. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, Howdy,
yes,
Mike,
Yes.
Mackenzie,
Yes.
Kevin,
Yes.
and myself is yes. All right, we're on to regular business. The first thing under regular business is limited purpose aquaculture. We have an application. We have a lot of paperwork in our packet here. There's been an application from Rusty Bradford for a limited purpose aquaculture lease. I was going to say, I would first like to probably hear from Justin, if you don't mind, to see what the Harbor Committee said at their meeting, and then we could hear from, if Rusty is on here. I don't see anyone. Yeah, Justin.
Mr. Jeff Gertler's here, and for
Okay.
Russ to speak on that behalf.
Mhm.
basically, as the ordinance says, Mr. Gertler gave me his application for an LPA. I then submitted it to the Harbor Committee for a recommendation to approve or disapprove. They were unable to come to a decision. I gave you guys a memo basically outlining my opinion on what is in the ordinance for approval or disapproval.
Mhm.
And now we're just following through that procedure. So you guys are next on the list to review
Okay.
it. That's the decision.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Most of those people that were at the Harbor Committee meeting are on with us now, Jamie.
Oh, okay, good. And Chris, did you speak? I know we wanted to make sure we followed the correct procedure and everything. Did you speak to James about? Yep, okay.
I did, yeah. There were a few questions that I had for James. I think the one that is most concerning for you right now is whether or not you should act on the application without the notice sent to the neighbors.
Yes.
And James's opinion was that you should not take any action without that notice having been done.
Okay.
And so he recommended that the select board table the application and then for the select board to direct me and town staff to work with the applicant to complete the notice requirement.
Yes, Jeff.
Thank you. On that, and that was, I actually bounced that back to you guys. I think it was Chris. Yeah, Chris, I believe, Saunders. On that message, I wasn't given any information. I wasn't notified about the Harbor Committee or about, I found out, so I was able to come in on them. On the application itself, if you look at my going to the town and requesting the Harbor Master signature, I believe that's page 14. The notification of riparian owners is on page 17. I am required to give them a complete application by certified mail before I could submit to the state. The state requires a notification to the other owners, not the town. So it's one of those, and this is the cart before the horse thing. How do I provide a completed application without the Harbor Master signature? So this is the question I have for you guys. How do I do one with so you're asking me to do something incomplete, which is forcing me to do it again. I have to send them a notification, then get a signature, and then send them a notification. This requirement is to get the Harbor Master signature, then send it to my neighbor's notification, and then submit to the state. So the process that you're requiring is backwards from what the state requirement is.
Okay. Chris, do you have any, I know this is more planning board stuff as far as knowing knowing all of these rules and regulations, but do you, would you like to comment on that, I guess?
Well, when I read the notice to riparian owners, it says the town harbor master or other official is required to sign the application form to certify that the project will not unreasonably interfere with navigation, fishing, or other uses, or the ingress and egress of riparian landowners. It isn't saying that the harbor master has already signed off on it. And I think that's what James's point is that the whole purpose of the notice requirement is to give the neighbors as much opportunity as possible to have their their perspective considered. And so that was James, the town attorney's opinion was the select board should go through the notice requirement in order to check every box.
I think the attorney needs to speak with the state on that one, because the state's feeling is you're preempting them. Because it's one of those. So the state mandate is go through the process, and it's page by page. Identify a plot, whatever. Identify a diagram. Identify the gear. Get the signature. Go to the neighbors. Go to the state. I don't see how I'm taking page 17 and inserting it before page 14 to appease the town. And the state, as far as they're concerned, says that I can submit without the harbor master signature at all. I'm trying to do this the correct way, the neighborly way. However, they're going to accept the application with or without the signature. As long as I notify the riparian owners, I could submit the application tomorrow. I just have to show up for certified mail. I would rather do this correctly. I would rather do it, but there's a number of questions, and I've been told a number of things. It's been implied, I can even go back to the harbor committee meeting, whereas 3 of the 7 abstained. They had no knowledge of the subject, no knowledge of what I was inquiring to do. So 3 people who are saying yes and no, pretty much step back saying, we don't know anything about it. Can't vote. So there's a problem with the harbor committee and the lack of knowledge of what I'm even asking them to do, which is part of their job. There should have been something into that.
I guess I don't know whether we should speak with the harbor committee and James, before we make any decision on this, Chris, or I would also, I'm not sure, but this, I believe where it's above the low water mark, would this also fall into a land use ordinance as well? That would be a big question for me.
Yeah.
I don't know if Jesse could answer that, or I mean, these are kind of planning board questions, but I would think it would, my own judgment.
It would require planning board review.
Okay. Yeah. So the procedure then, Chris, would be from us to the state, and then after that would be the planning board. Okay.
Correct.
How does the rest of you guys, Kevin, Mackenzie, Howdy, Mike, how do you feel about acting on this? Where James has said we should probably hold for a second and just make sure everything's right. Do you feel like we should speak with him maybe before we move forward, or what do you guys think?
I think going against council's advice is never a great idea.
Yeah.
I agree with Kevin. If he's saying put on the brakes, then I think we need to do what he's saying. So so I'm clear, the abutters haven't been notified yet. Jeff was his audio was a little gurgly for me, so I didn't quite get everything.
Okay.
They've all been notified by somebody because they were all in the harbor committee meeting. I have yet to receive notification from the town in regard to any of these meetings. I'm getting a phone call saying, hey, by the way, did you know they're talking about you this evening? But yet, if I go on to the participants, I know that Amos Lawrence is there. I don't know how he learned. I'm also just looking for other names that were there last time. Richard Prudhomme is there. How are these individuals? Tom Bissell is here. How have they all learned of this when I'm the applicant? Haven't even been informed. So someone sharing knowledge with somebody, but not sharing it with me. This is the second meeting that I've been informed that I've been on the dock, that the town has never even indicated to me that, hey, I should attend tonight.
Jamie, can I address just one aspect of that?
Yeah. Yes, please.
So on the application itself, there's an email address, and I sent this agenda and memo to that email address. That's all
What email do you have?
It's lgbrdb@roadrunner.com.
That's Rusty. He's the one who shared it with me.
That's the email address that's on the application. So I don't know how I can send it to another email address.
But even so, with the first meeting, I wasn't done, but everyone else is here. So notifications going out. Was that and again, has the town notified the other riparian owners?
Agendas are publicly posted. So they're all at the post offices. They're all on the website. I assume that's how everyone finds out about these things. Right?
There seems to be a big question from you about notifications, but yet I don't seem to be getting them.
Yeah, well, I think if you did good, Chris, as long as you notify the applicant via email, that's all that's required of you. Yep.
I think
Yeah, sorry, Kevin.
Yeah, I think we're talking 2 different types of notification too. There's an official legal notification to the abutters, And I think a lot of this discussion seems to be notification of what the agenda of the meeting is.
I understand that, but the notification is a requirement of the state, not of the town. If you're making it a requirement of the town, that's my argument right now here is you're not gonna do anything because you're gonna say notification and you're standing by notification. It's not a requirement by the town. The town doesn't have a standard. The state has a standard. The notification is part of the state. It's not part of the town. I'm only asking the town to vote on whether or not they'll give the harbor master his right to sign or not sign. That's what I'm asking of the town, not to rewrite aquaculture and LPA application law.
Yeah, I think that I would feel much more comfortable speaking with James before we move forward with this.
Now, if James is town council,
Yes.
shouldn't he be here? I actually purposely indicated that this was going to be a question and an issue tonight by email. So knowing that, wouldn't it be reasonable for him to comment?
I'm sorry, your audio broke up there for a second.
I'm just saying, wouldn't it be logical that he should be here to comment on that this evening, knowing that this was going to be a question, knowing that you were given advance notice that this was going to be a question tonight?
Yeah, I'm not sure whether Chris has contacted him, or we haven't had a chance to meet on this. Usually we'll meet on it. If it's something we feel like we need to speak with James about, then we will ask him to come in the next meeting. That's how we always do it.
And that meeting would be, so that I'm aware, it's on my own schedule.
Yeah, I mean, next meeting would be next Monday. We have one every Monday this month. It would be, obviously Chris would have to check on his schedule just to be sure that he could attend. But, that would be, I think that would be my thought.
That email from Mr. Gertler was included in the packet that went out in that email too, so everybody was aware. And I did talk to Mr. Gertler on Friday and told him he was on the agenda for Monday's meeting.
Yes, that's how I learned initially.
Oh, so you were notified then.
Pardon?
I said, so you were notified then?
Well, only because I called. I was notified by my father-in-law, so I called the harbor master.
And the ordinance doesn't have anything to do with notifying riparian owners. He's 100% correct on that. That's part of his application process with the state. Everybody gets a full packet.
Mm.
So why do we care if Justin signs?
We're making sure we're doing all what's right for Tremont waters. It's going through the proper channels to make sure we're all in commitment. He, like you said, he can submit the application without my signature. The state is going to call and ask why. So it's good to have everybody's backing or not backing. So we have, we're going down the right road with it.
Yep.
James is not comfortable with this. Okay.
Yeah, I guess I should ask as well, if there's anyone who would like to comment on this in the audience as well. I know that it's so hard when we're on a Zoom meeting here. I'm trying to look through all of the boxes here, and yeah, I guess if there's anyone that would like to raise their hand or something, and I can try to get it. Okay, Richard.
Hi, thanks. Yeah, I can speak a little bit on behalf of some of the neighbors and abutters, but if this issue is going to be tabled for this meeting, will there be another meeting at which we can then comment directly on this issue?
Yes, it should be. Chris, would you say that it would be open for comment now more so, or after we spoke with James? Or I guess comment now would be as good as it would be then, or it would be.
The only problem I have, well, the only question I have with that is that if the application gets changed between now and that next meeting, people won't have a chance to comment on what the actual current application is.
Yeah, I can't see how the application would change between now and then. Correct me if I'm wrong, Chris, on this, but I think, you know, it should stay exactly the same. All we're doing is getting our town's attorney's point of view on things and take that into consideration.
Well, if it goes through the planning board, there will be a public hearing too at some point.
Yes.
So I mean, which is an official public comment time.
Mhm.
I mean, even if there isn't, that's when the actual town approvals will be done. I assume that will be one of the final stages. So, I mean, like I say, that there will always be a chance to express yourself at that anyway. This won't be the only opportunity.
Okay, so do you think, is this when we should say something about, say, opposition to the notion of an LPA in Mitchell Cove? Is this the right time to do that? Are you saying that when the application is reconsidered, I don't know, next week, whenever the next selectman meeting is, that would not be a good time to comment?
No, I believe that, I mean, usually this is, like Kevin had said, this is, sorry, it's not in our jurisdiction more, it's more the planning board. So there would be a public hearing for the planning board. So if, say we did approve it, then
Can I
Jeff,
ask the question again? And it's kind of, I guess it's kind of getting a little bit silly. In a sense, the easiest way to describe this is it's a garden. You're talking about planning boards and committees and hearings. If you were planning, and many of you probably have a garden in your backyard, did you have to ask permission for it? Did you have to go to the town and get approval? Did you have to have a public hearing on it? In a sense, this is a section of land I'm asking to use on my property in the water, in the shore. It is intertidal, but it's the size of a small living room. It's 400 square feet. It's clams. They'd be growing underneath the bottom soil, so you wouldn't even see them. I just don't understand how a garden. I'm only applying for an LPA because it protects the garden. It allows someone else from coming in and harvesting tomatoes. And this is where it's a little bit crazy, and the opposition to it. And if someone was a gardener, would they be upset if someone walked in and picked all their lettuce and harvested their tomatoes?
no, I think we're just trying to make sure that we do the proper procedure. We go through everything correctly.
I'm speaking to the neighbors.
Oh, and we just want to be sure that, you know, this is, we're doing everything correctly. I think that we should speak to James, and then maybe, you know, we'll obviously, this will be on next week's meeting, you know, pending that he can be there or he can attend, or and then also any abutters would have a chance once it goes to the planning board after the state. Am I correct, Chris? Is
That sounds right to me.
okay?
So just so I'm totally clear, if I'd like to summarize some points in opposition, is this the moment to do it, you think? And then I could speak it. If it gets ultimately back to the planning board at some point, I could do it again then.
Yeah, I would think that it would be best at the planning board. You know, that is kind of their thing, and I think that's, you know, when they have public hearings, normally that's where you would hear neighbors comment, and, you know, for other commercial things.
Is the public, since I'm sorry, I'm just unfamiliar with some of the processes, would that planning board meeting be discussing issues around the land use ordinance? Is that what you're referring to?
Maybe Jesse could actually weigh in on this a little bit, if you don't mind, Jesse.
Yes, they would be reviewing the land use ordinance and potentially the site plan review ordinance if it triggered review under that. They'd be reviewing both of those, the application with both of those ordinances.
Okay, would they be at that point addressing themselves to specific questions about aquaculture licensing? or would that be sort of like general commercial use?
I don't think they would delve into licensing too deep. They only go by what's in the ordinance, in the review criteria in the ordinances.
Okay, because maybe I should just summarize some points now then. This is the only chance I'll have to talk directly to aquaculture issues. I don't know whether that's agreeable to people or what. I could come back next week if that makes more sense when it's actually being discussed. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I would think, do you think, Chris, that we should wait and try to get, wait until we find out from James which way this is going to move and go from there? And I think if we're taking too much public comment right now, we're kind of putting the cart before the horse a little bit, is my thoughts. But Kevin or anybody else want to speak on that as well? Or
My only thought is I'm having a little trouble understanding what the concerns are. And I would just like, if someone could just briefly, it looks to me like it's smaller than most of the boats sitting out in the harbor. And it's mostly on the ground. So I honestly am having a little trouble grasping what the issue is. And I'm sure I'm missing something. But I was just kind of curious, what's going on? What's the issue?
Sure, I can summarize a little bit if you'd like. I think I don't want to get into too much detail, but the general opposition to, let's say, the application itself kind of falls into two areas. And one is just the status of the application itself. And the application itself, as I think has already been determined, seems very incomplete on a number of points, not just the notification of riparian owners, but some other points as well. One of the points in which it seems incomplete is on the, for example, on like page 8, I think it is, there's a section of the application which asks for a detailed description of all the existing uses of the area. And on the application, that's left completely blank. Boating is left blank, commercial fishing is left blank, recreational fishing is left blank, all other uses are left blank. And so the picture that the application presents of the cove is of an unused area, as though no one's using it. So why not just set up an LPA there? And I think the overwhelming sense of neighbors, people in the Mitchell Cove area, is that it's used all the time. It's been used for generations. It has all sorts of uses, and that those uses are protected by the regulations, both local and at the state level. Actually, the state level regulations inform the local ones. And so, there are a whole set of overlapping interests, overlapping rights that are interfered with directly by this plot. And I don't know if you're familiar with Mitchell Cove itself, but it's a deeply intertidal area. It's nothing like a kind of muddy wasteland. It's being used all the time, for recreational activities, but also for the kinds of activities that the state and the local application recognize as legitimate, navigation and by hand-powered craft, various kinds of recreation, also community clamming rights or customary uses. Those are recognized under fishing claims. Anyway, so the particular spot we're talking about is right smack in the middle of this whole network of uses, this whole network of protected uses that people have been enjoying and practicing for generations, decades, forever. The local community clamming sort of informal traditional access probably stretches back to colonial times. There's just a deeply established web of uses of that very spot, and they'll, at some point, other commenters, neighbors, abutters, people who use and love the cove would happily speak to their uses, how it's affected them, what it means to them, how their kids play there, how they walk their dogs there, how they do whatever there. But the point is ultimately that there is a deep set of existing uses, which is acknowledged and protected in the law and the regulations. And that's what we're interested in protecting, interested in having be acknowledged, and not having those traditional private uses be traded off for one person's exclusive right to fishing claims in that area, no matter how small it might seem on the map. And if you've been to Mitchell Cove, you may know that it's walkable, it's usable, way out into virtually into the middle of the cove, certainly including any kind of area that we're talking about for this LPA. Anyway, I don't want to take all your time, but that's kind of like an overview, I think, of what the neighborhood, what the abutters and others are thinking about and what they're worried about. And we can go into significant detail at any point that you wish.
Well, personally, I'd rather you didn't tonight.
Yeah.
I just, like I say, I was looking for a brief summary of, what the concerns were.
Yeah.
And I think you've probably explained it, and that's, like I said, with this.
My hand is raised again, so if I can respond to those comments.
Yes, you can respond. I just don't want this to turn into a debate at this point. I'd rather, if any of the other board members have questions as well, I'd like to get those answered, and then, but yes, go ahead. And
refresh. So yes, that has been used for clamming for quite some time. However, one thing that we know is green crabs have been devastating the clam flats. The clam stock there is dying. This would actually help the cove and preserve the clamming for future generations, because the town's not supplying seed or staff. The offspring of these clams would actually benefit the cove. It would help repopulate a cove that has a diminishing supply. In the time that I've been there, which is, I've been going to that cove for over 20 years. My father-in-law lives across the street, and he's the neighbor of all the people who are raising their hands against me. His name is on the application of the people who are raising their hand against him. As for commercial fishing, he knows that it's been used, but even in the time that I've been there, I've only encountered one person crossing the land to go fishing there, commercially, shell fishing. How did they get there? They crossed 113 Locust Point. That's my property. People have been accessing this cove across our land the entire time, taking it for granted that it's their public access. If I restrict the access, I restrict the access to the commercial fishermen. I restrict the access to the other residents of Locust Point. I restrict the access to anyone who wants to go strolling there. And technically, from what I understand about intertidal, they don't have rights to be crisscrossing across the shorelands anyways. It came.
Excuse me.
As far
Excuse me. That's not true, because my parents bought the land in 1961, and they made an easement with the Acadian National Park, making a 10-foot access to the cove. There's a 10-foot access to the cove between your property and my property. And that access, when the easement agreement was, I have it in writing that local people are allowed to go down to the cove and clam there. And your commercial enterprise is going to interfere with that. Just because you have stated that they're going to the cove through your property is untrue.
Well, they have been.
Hang on just a second. I don't think this is the appropriate time to have a debate as such. I think we're definitely putting the cart before the horse here. I think that I just, if any of the other members of the board have any questions that they would like to have answered, now is the time to do it. But then, obviously, next meeting, this will be on the agenda as well. And I think when it comes more to a decision time, then it's best to get comments then. Is everybody all set on the board? Seeing everybody, how do you good? I can't.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, okay, yep. All right, so then everybody, Chris, would you like a motion on this to table it, or just say we're tabling it until we speak with James?
If you wanted, if you are interested in making a specific request to have these certified notices go out, then I would encourage you to make a motion. But if you want to wait for James, then you can wait, and I will reach out to him and schedule a time on an upcoming agenda.
Yeah, I think that we just need to speak with James. I don't know about anyone else, what you feel, but I think if we can just get him in on the next meeting, if he can, then that would be great.
Yeah, I say wait for James and let's get this so we can get this going for this guy. I really think he ought to be able to do this.
Yep.
Oh.
Okay. So we'll just table it then, Chris? Okay, perfect. All right, moving on to the next thing on regular business is the Wharf House. And the Harbor Committee has passed a motion asking the select board to request the town manager to get quotes for demolishing and leveling the Wharf House. Once again, Justin, can you just bring us up to date on what the board was thinking? Or actually, I see Art here as well. I didn't see him before. There was so many people on here. But Justin, if you want to start, would be great.
Sure. So I put this on the agenda for last month just because it's been over a year since we talked about it, and the building's just sitting there idling. We all know its condition. We all know we don't have money to do anything with it. And we all know we're looking for grants to do something with it. But we talked to the Harbor Committee just for thoughts and ideas, any updated plans, and they recommended that we get this so we kind of have a better idea. It was not the intention of the board to level it, but they did want a quote just to see, a rough estimate, see, if it's worth knocking it down, doing something with parking there, or just safer to wait and come up with a different plan.
Okay. Yeah, I know we spoke a lot about this, a year or so ago, tried to get a plan together. Me personally, my 2 cents on it is I would never want to tear down a building without a plan. As we all know,
I agree.
You've got like a year to rebuild before your grandfathering rights are gone. And I don't want to see another property down there. One of, the Clausen property was torn down. It was made into a small parking lot. I don't think it's used very efficiently. Definitely doesn't get its revenue back in to what we spent in it. So I think that there should be a plan of what we want to do with it long term before we go tearing anything down.
Is the Harbor Committee's intentions to build something down the road or just make it a parking lot? Or we don't have a plan? That's our problem.
Art, would you like to speak on that, or?
Sure, I mean, I will. I guess it was more me than anyone that brought it up. And I totally agree, knowing that once the building is torn down, you only have a year, and we may well regret afterwards. My only thought was, we have no idea what it's going to cost. I have no idea what it costs to tear down a building. And I just kind of wanted to have some idea. I mean, I think the word quote is too strong a word. Really, estimate's a much better word. Would help us to even have discussions about our options. I mean, if the estimate to tear down that place was $40,000, and who knows, everything seems to be so expensive on the island now, involving construction or destruction. That we we'd be better informed to know that. I mean, personally, I would love to. I look at the bones of that building from the outside, and I think that it looks just fine from the outside, with the exception of some derelict stairs, which could be easily rebuilt. It's being used right now by the library as storage, and my wife informs me that she's going to come to you and ask for us to use it for a little more storage. So it's definitely useful in a small way to the town as it is. Just wanted to kind of have an idea how expensive it would be to do the thing we almost don't want to do, which is to tear it down. We do know it's going to be pretty expensive without a grant. And of course, Justin's been great about grants, and there are grants out there. Right now, we can't really find one. It's not a Homeland Security issue, unfortunately. That would have been a good one, but I think we failed on that one. We don't really qualify for it. So I'm all for leaving it up. It looks fine from the outside. I'd much rather that we needed who knows, an assistant harbor master. We need a place that we can house people who work for the town, and the town would have this asset right there, a beautiful place to live. That would be far better, but it looks like it would be a lot of money. So it just allows us to have a better discussion, to know what the cost of doing away with it would be. That's all.
Okay.
I agree with Jamie and Howdy. I wouldn't even want to entertain tearing it down until there's a plan in place. Just coming up with a shell with an apartment, for an office for the harbor master and a garage underneath was met with way more opposition than I would ever have guessed. I think it's going to take quite a while to come to an agreement on what would happen with the property. I seriously doubt it would happen in any kind of a year time frame. And I think by the time we did something, the price of demolishing a building might change totally anyway. My suggestion are, make a couple phone calls. There's a couple companies around that do it and say, what do you think it would cost? They'll give you a ballpark.
Well, that's a darn good idea. I mean, I have some concerns about my own house along these lines, and it would be kind of nice to know how much that option costs in this general area. Kevin, that's a great idea, and I'll do it.
Yeah, I think I'd be a lot more comfortable with that than making an official request.
Yep.
I do think that we need to do something with the wharf house. You know, this kind of brought it back up on the radar again. I know it's been a year or so, but we should get a plan together. There's no grants, Justin, that you've seen recently that you think we would at all qualify for?
Not right now.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, the best one that we, would be eligible for would be the SHIP grant. And Chris and I talked about that. We don't think it's viable. Plus, we already used it, so
yeah,
it'd be a little hard to get more money out of them.
And the Homeland Security one you can't use. I thought at one point, if you had a bay for the harbor master's boat, you could, but is that not true? No. Okay.
No, I did look into that one a year ago, and we'd have to really, it just wouldn't work.
Yep.
And be 100% legal. So
yeah,
can't really be justified.
No, and my whole thing is I don't want to see anything elaborate go there. I just want to see it used for something. That's all. Because I hate to see another building be torn down, and that house, the Clausen house, as everyone calls it, that was up there, got torn down. In Justin, you sign out the permit. How many permits do you think you issue for that lot in the run of a year?
$1,200 worth, maybe.
Well, yeah, $1,200 a year worth of permits for a $250,000 house. I just don't want to see that again. That's all. All right. So, anybody have any input for what we should do for now? Nothing. Just
do nothing.
Yeah.
Leave it.
Okay. And then maybe, Justin, if you keep your eyes open, and when we do see a grant come up, then we'll all get back together and talk about this again, and hopefully we can do something.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thanks, Art. All right, the next thing on the agenda is law enforcement contract. Chris, do you want to explain what, I know the changes are pretty basic, but I'll just let you explain what you did and go from there.
Yep. So in the financing paragraph, about halfway down the page, I just changed all the hours from 30 hours to 45 hours. In your memo, I wrote, if you had stuck with 30 hours in the FY22 contract, costs still would have gone up because as you can see, every year, you go from $68 per hour in calendar year 2021 to $73 per hour in calendar year 2022. So there are increases regardless of how many hours they are in Tremont per week. But if you made no change to the contract, the FY22 budget would have $109,980. And if you did make this change to the contract, the FY22 budget would have would be $164,970. So it's basically $54,990. We'll call it $55,000 increase due to the additional hours.
And that would have to go in front of town vote to be approved.
Yeah, the town warrant last year that got approval for this 3-year contract specifically had a line that said that copies were available at the town clerk's office. And so because of that, this exact contract was the one that was approved. And so in order to change it, town meeting needs to approve a new contract.
Mm-hmm.
Does anybody think that $55,000 is a lot for 15 extra hours? That seems like a lot to me, or no?
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of money.
If we're paying them over $100,000 for 30 hours and then another 55 for 15 more hours, seems like a lot, but I think we need the coverage. It just seems like a lot of money, or maybe I'm missing something. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's a lot of money. I think that there's been a lot of people voice that they feel that we need to have some additional coverage here. And I mean, the only other thing would be to price shop it, but we've done that before and we've had the same results, I think, each time. So
I don't think the 15 more hour coverage is going to make a difference myself. I think we stay with what we got. That's my opinion.
Yep.
What does 15 extra hours get us? More patrol, more just people in town, just deputies in town?
Mm. Yeah, it's just patrol hours. So those are standard hours, right, Chris? So it'd be standard patrol.
Okay.
I mean, I would be comfortable sending it to the voters and letting them make the decision on it. And then, if they feel that they want it, then so be it. If they don't, then it doesn't go through.
Yeah, and I'm fine with that as well too. I mean, it could go, if it goes in front of the voters, then that's everyone's decision at that point, whether they think it's worth it or not. No, what do you think, Kevin?
No, I'm fine with that. I think taking it to town meeting's fine. I think probably you do the math at 55,000 is just the cost of the extra hours.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I don't disagree with Howdy as far as I think that, it's a lot of money, and I do think it's a lot of money to spend on this, but I guess at the end of the day, that's the right way to do it, is just to have everyone vote, and we'll see how important it is to people.
Well, there've been a lot of concerns over the years about coverage and,
Mm-hmm.
lack of it and response time, and having patrols in town more often should help with that anyway.
Yeah.
So again, I think town residents can decide.
I agree with Kevin on that. Just let them make the decision. And, if you factored in the price increase per hour, I think it's pretty close to what it would be per hour, as if you were doing 30 hours. So there's been a lot of people that have voiced concerns I know at least some of us on the board. So let's see what happens.
Okay, does anybody have a motion then, or either way?
I'll make a motion to request that the town manager to place the revised law enforcement contract with Hancock County Sheriff's Office, increasing weekly coverage from 30 hours to 45 hours on the draft 2021 annual town meeting warrant.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to request the town manager to place the revised law enforcement contract with Hancock County Sheriff's Office, increasing weekly coverage from 30 hours to 45 hours on the draft 2021 annual town meeting warrant. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, Howdy,
Yes.
Mike,
Yes.
Mackenzie,
Yes.
Kevin,
Yes.
and myself is yes. All right, next is the FY22 budget. That's your department, Chris.
Indeed it is. So I will cut straight to the chase. I've got some overall comments, some comments on the revenues, and then comments on expenditures. And I'm happy to take questions once I go through this quick summary. So top thing that people always want to know, what's the mill rate? So the proposed mill rate in this budget is $11.17. That's 4.5% up from last year. Last year's, just for reference, was $10.69. So on a $250,000 house, that's an increase of $120 per year. Of course, going into that mill rate, there's four main components. There's the town budget, the school budget, the Tremont school budget, the high school budget, and the county budget. So the town budget is up 1.3%. That's intentional. That's the exact same amount as the Social Security cost of living adjustment, which is our measurement of inflation. So it's exactly the same as inflation. The school budget is up 6%. And again, that's pending their meeting with you next week. So that's the number that we discussed at the meeting a couple weeks ago. The high school budget is up 4% and the county budget is up 5.7%. So again, overall, that leads to a mill rate that's up 4.5%, $11.17 overall. So looking on the revenue side, the one area that I really want you to spend some time thinking about is the unassigned fund balance. So after many years, we've been talking about this a long time, MMA recommends that you keep the unassigned fund balance at 10 to 12% of total expenditures. So as of the FY20 audit, that amount was $884,282, which is actually 14.2% of FY20 expenditures. So you're actually 2% over that recommended amount. And I think that it's actually, again, my recommendation to stay within that 10 to 12% range. I don't think that it's necessarily beneficial to run a huge unassigned fund balance and continue to increase taxes for taxpayers beyond inflation. And so if you wanted to stay within that 10 to 12% range, you could use anywhere from $135,000 to $260,000 of that unassigned fund balance for either expenditures, or you could put it into reserves, into various reserve accounts. This budget currently that's in front of you only uses $24,000. So you actually have a lot more that you could use within that. Again, I'm not advocating necessarily spending it. You might want to put it into reserve accounts, but I do think you should have a conversation around what's the amount where you want that to be. Another area that I think you should put some thought into is the municipal revenue sharing reserve and what the target balance of that reserve is. So historically, what we've used is 3 years total receipts in that balance. So how much will we receive from the state over the course of 3 years? That's the target balance, and then anything above that we transfer out into the general fund for general fund expenses in that fiscal year. That amount that's in there is actually going up considerably every year, which is a good thing, because the state has been increasing the amount of revenue sharing that they're doing. So last year we received $63,000. This year, I'm estimating that we will receive about $84,000, and it's entirely possible that next year we'll receive $100,000. So it could, 3 years receipts could actually be $240,000. If you want to hold your revenue, your reserve fund at that balance, you actually couldn't transfer out anything, because that's not historically what we have received. So another way you could look at it is, what have we actually received over the last 3 years? And that sum is $136,000. And that's what I've used. And then anything above that, I transfer out. And so as a result, this budget calls for transferring in just under $70,000 from that reserve. But again, my point is that you might actually strategically choose to transfer out more than that, and that might make sense. The last major revenue change that's in here is just that wharf fees are up substantially due to the wharf fee increase that you approved last year. Again, this was very intentional. This is helping save up for future dock repairs. But as you're having conversations about the wharf house, I would say, that should at least enter into the conversation. I won't presume to say that you should use those fees for that, but you might want to think about using those fees for that. All right, so I'll pause right there before I jump into expenses. Are there any questions on the revenue side? Okay, I'll jump into expenses. So I included in your packet the list of all the changes over $5,000. I'm not going to highlight all of them right now because I think that some of them are pretty routine. I have made some changes to staff wages based on performance, and altogether they're really not very substantial, but if you do want to discuss them, I would recommend that we go into executive session, and we should plan to do that at the next meeting. But one major change that doesn't have anything to do with a particular person, but and so therefore should occur in open session, is this budget does include a full-time code enforcement officer. I do anticipate that new employee taking on some deputy clerk responsibilities, such as waiting on customers. Our customer flow has really increased over the last couple of years, and I think that our office could really handle an extra full-time person. And the code enforcement responsibilities have also increased, so having that person there 5 days, a week, I think would make a really big difference for a lot of people. So that expense is in here. I did include the increased law enforcement expense due to extended hours. This budget includes $30,000 to construct a pole barn to replace the public works tent. The fabric is fallen apart. We have a temporary repair there, but I don't think it's going to last terribly long. Also, the frame inside there is really falling apart, and our insurance company was not pleased when they were here last time. I think it's about as old as this whole complex, and so I think putting in a pole barn would be a great way to inexpensively have a permanent fix. The budget includes $40,000 to pave the north driveway at the town office, as well as the area in front of the salt sand shed. This is something that's been on the wish list for a while, and I think it finally does fit into the budget. It includes a transfer out of $10,000 to the Seal Cove Fishway Reserve to provide matching funds for future grants that we anticipate applying for substantial repairs to that fishway to bring back the AOF population in Seal Cove Pond. This budget calls for transferring in $50,000 to the road improvement program. That's actually substantially down from last year. Last year, including the encumbrance, you transferred in a total of about $200,000. $50,000, I think, is about the right amount because you are making substantial road improvements to those three roads, Hodgdon, Dodge Point, and south end of the Cape Road this year. And so that's not going to be an expense going forward. And I think 50,000 is just a good number every year to be putting into that reserve. And if you think about, every 4 years, you'll have put in $200,000. You could either think of that as enough to do a full road reconstruction or enough to do what you're doing this year, where you put in an overlay and do that more frequently. Either one is fine. But I just think 50,000 is a good number to think of as every year as your savings. This budget includes the $50,000 transfer to the public safety reserve to save up for the new fire station. That was your request from the last meeting. This budget does not include an expense of $75,000 for a town-wide reevaluation. I think that's just something that should be on your radar for future years. Currently, the evaluations from the assessors are close enough to the sales prices that I don't think it's absolutely necessary now, but it has been a little while. And so I think it might be worth considering the $75,000 reevaluation. And then this budget does include a transfer out from the road improvement program of $140,000 for improving Dix Point Road. That's a real, wild guess estimate. But the money's in there, and so I just put it in there to transfer out. That's not, actual attack. That's not a taxpayer appropriation. It's just taking it out of the reserve. So that's my quick summary of what's in there, and I'm happy to answer any questions. The next meeting, you still don't have to make any decisions, but I do need your recommendations, and then at the meeting after that is when we would actually finalize the budget.
Sounds
Thanks,
good,
Chris.
Thank you.
The leftover money from this road construction now, that's what you're putting towards the Dix Point Road, is that
Correct.
correct? Or-
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, and that's great, it's phenomenal. We have some banked away here, and the only thing that comes to my mind with starting to put money aside for something is we've had two things. One of them's obviously the wharf house, which I know that is a little tricky as far as how it's paid for with harbor funds and whatnot. But that, and also we've talked about a safety complex here, or fire department, ambulance service, whatever if you want to call it. And I think that maybe we should consider or think about putting some money towards one of those or both of those. Just an idea.
I've kind of blanked on the undedicated fund balance, the name of it, sorry. But
It's just called the unassigned fund balance.
okay, well, that makes sense. And I thought we had a different term for it. Anyway, I don't think we need to go any higher than what we've got. And I think if we can use some of that for these other projects or to keep the tax increase lower, I think that's a much better idea. So I think any of that we don't build up and we can use to reduce the tax burden, or again, to fund some of the other things. I would personally, I'd rather see the tax increase closer to 3% than 4.5%. And I understand that's not always possible, but if we can get closer to it, I'd be a lot happier. And I realize that means a lot of juggling different stuff, but I guess that's what we're doing.
What would that be, Chris, money wise, to bring that down to around 3%? Just curious as to.
Well, it could be no change at all to your expenditures and just transferring more out of the unassigned fund balance to lower that.
Mm-hmm.
So let's see here.
I'm not, nailed to a 3%, but I would rather see it closer to that than where it is if we can do it.
So that would mean a mill rate of $11.01.
I know things have been coming in pretty well, but I'm still getting a feeling this COVID is going to catch up with the finances at some point.
Mm-hmm. Just thinking here. Yep, so that would be an appropriation of $5.6 million, which would be $83,000 less than what we're currently appropriating. So either you'd have to transfer $83,000 additionally out of the unassigned fund balance, or you'd have to cut $83,000.
Mm-hmm.
And what are we at percentage wise on our unassigned fund?
You have 14.2%. And so if you translate that to actual dollars, that's 135,000. So if you wanted to get back down to 12%, that would be transferring out $135,000 from the unassigned fund balance. And if you wanted to get down to 10%, that would actually be transferring $260,000 from the unassigned fund balance.
I think 75,000 would make a real dent in the increase, and that would make it much more reasonable. And I mean, usually that balance by the end of the year, I mean, both Dana and you, I think, have done a really good job budgeting for the last several years. That unassigned balance has gone up by the end of every fiscal year anyway. So I think if we take it down to close to 12%, it's probably going to go up some from the end of the year. And we've just cut the tax increase down a lot. I'm in favor of around 75,000 range out of that balance to use towards the current budget.
I agree with Kevin.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good idea. Like I said, my only thing is we've started to take care of some roads and stuff, and I would like to see one of these projects that's kind of just been hanging out start to move forward. You know, especially like the Wharf House one, just because that was a topic this evening. Like to see something get, instead of just getting thrown on the back burner and sit there for 5 more years, is start moving forward with something.
Yeah, well, this gives us a chance to do everything we've talked about and reduce what the effects would be on everyone in town.
Mm-hmm.
If we take some of that unassigned fund balance. And I agree with Jamie. I think the Wharf House needs to be something that's dealt with sooner rather than later. You know, I think it's going to be a relatively long process, but I think we can. I think it'd be good to start addressing that soon.
Anyone else have any ideas of what we could do?
I think Chris has done a good job. I mean, our side is only up 1.3%. I mean, that's not too shabby. I mean, whatever we can do to reduce taxes, but I agree. I mean, we've had some of these things hanging over our heads for years, and we need to make up our minds and do something about it instead of putting it off for the next year.
You know, a thing that occurs to me with the Wharf House is one of the challenges that we've had with it is that we've been constrained by using only wharf funds for it and only having the use of it be a wharf use. But if you really wanted to move forward, you could think more broadly about uses for it that aren't just wharf use. So there could be a public works benefit there. There could be a recreational benefit there. I'm just thinking out loud. But if you broaden its potential use, then you broaden the funding sources.
Because what you're saying, Chris, is if we say you made it a harbor master shack in that only, and that's it, then it would have to come out of the harbor funds and not out of the others. Yes. I just think
that's a hard sell. I think it's a hard sell for people to justify general fund dollars being spent on that.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah.
Jamie, I'm having some technical issues. I'm getting a lot of feedback. I'm going to pause the recording. I'm going to make you the host, and I'm going to log back out and come back in.
Okay.